This is episode one and season one of the That Christian Next Door podcast. Our hearts and aim is speaking the truth about Christian life in the 21st century and God's continuing relevance to all. Our focus this first season is exemplifying, normalizing, and clarifying what it means to have the title Christian. The theme of season one is the Christian journey. In this first episode, we discuss the Christian's freedom of choice for God. We also discuss self sacrifice and change. Speakers in this episode are myself, Samuel Obasi, the host, and Carlos Ebude Akbe, a recurring guest of the show. Be blessed. I think in the introduction, you talked about yourself. You told us your history a little bit. You've been a Christian for about 3 years. Was that a tough decision to make? What was that like for you?
Oh, it was a very easy decision for me, and I know it's not the same for everybody else. But on my part, I think it was I won't okay. I said easy, but maybe not too difficult because I grew up from a Christian family, and how I would see myself before as not really a Christian, but as a good guy. That was the word I would use for myself. But then being a Christian, then or being a follower of Christ, I then you know decided to know this person that is referred to as our Lord and Savior Jesus. I desired more of him, and I decided to become like him. So that was it. So it was just good guy first, and follow of Christ next. So it wasn't really challenging for me, because for some other people it might be they have to let go of a lot of things, and they have to become a certain way, or have to act a certain way. But I feel like my lifestyle or my life was already filtered in such a way that I knew what was right and I knew what was wrong. But at the same time, I didn't have Jesus. So it was almost like I have to start a new life, but not really a new life, but this time I have to start it with Jesus. So that was just it, just starting this new walk with um, Jesus. So
Yeah, I feel like when you say start this new walk with Jesus, sometimes it can sound a bit vague.
yeah.
And I don't mean this to you now, just in general. It's a challenge for Christians. What is it about Jesus? What is it about a relationship with God that is better than just being a good person? Do you get that question?
Yeah, I believe that, anything that's outside God is just a life, which is unfulfilled. And I'll tell you this, and I'm trying not to sound too profound or anything, but in this world that we're in, I believe that we all desire something more. I believe in the Bible, if we read the story of a famous king, there is a story of a famous king. His name was King Solomon, and in one of the scriptures, he says that I've obtained everything. I've obtained money. I've obtained power. I've obtained women. I've obtained everything. I've tasted everything. I've enjoyed everything, but there's still something more. And I think that's how God has programmed each and every one of us, is that although we obtain things, although we live our lives the way we want, we're never satisfied. And it's because it's just the way he programs us, that even when we obtain the best of things, when we become successful in our own sense, we're not still fulfilled. We just want more. And I think it's just the way God has implanted that desire. That missing part of our lives is always him. I think it always points to him. And the answer, which I was speaking with one of my leaders, I think the way she answered that was that the answer that Solomon was looking for was that Solomon was looking for eternity. And who else has eternity but God? So, I know I don't want to sound too, make it look a bit mysterious and anything, but I believe that no matter how we are in our lives, our different paths, our different stages, even when we think we've obtained everything, and even if we believe that we've attained self righteousness, or we've walked, we've become the good people that we are, if we don't have this part that is God in our lives, we will never be fulfilled. We will never be fulfilled. So that's why I had to realize that. I had to be conscious of that, and I had to say, no, I rather start now. I rather start now to know Him, to establish a relationship with Him, so that when I do actually get like Solomon, if I do obtain those riches, that I don't ask myself that question and say, what is next? You know, Solomon had those things, but I believe that Solomon didn't have a relationship with God, and that's why his life was still a bit perplexed. And I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I think God is always the missing piece in each and every person's life. When they desire for something.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, actually. I was listening to a talk a couple of days ago, and what the person was saying was that there's a God-sized or a God-shaped missing part in
Yeah,
every one of us,
yeah,
and that missing part fits God perfectly,
yeah.
and I think that's actually really true what you say. You actually made a point there, and I want to go back into it. This idea of you knew you had to do this. How old are you? You're 19, 20, right?
20, yes. I just turned
20.
20 this year. Yeah.
Lovely. So, like to most people, to me, anyways, you're quite young, right?
Yes.
And to say and to choose that I'm going to be a Christian, that's actually quite a profound choice. Because being a Christian is not something you just tick on the census. It's not something you just say because your parents or your mother or your uncle used to go to church and used to bring you along. Or it's not something you say because you had your confirmation or you did communion or something like that.
Yeah.
Being a Christian is actually a lot more serious than perhaps some people might make it out to be. And it means looking at the example of Jesus through the Bible as taught by the pastor or as taught by the priest and following that example. And of course, the priest and the pastor must also follow that example as well, right?
Yes.
So it's a big undertaking for someone as young as you and for a guy as well. Just explain that. How does that work with you and what does that look like every day?
Um, it might look like it's a big challenge, but the thing about it is that, as I said, it also goes back to the idea of choice. And each and every person, each and every guy has a choice to make, especially men. I believe our choices are more, consequential or have more effects than the choices with women. I know it might not sound like that, but I believe as men, the choices we make really does affect those around us, especially with our families and you know our friends and everything. Um, I made this choice because, and I'm going to say this one, I genuinely had an encounter with God, and as I said, I saw myself going somewhere, and like Solomon, I reached that point, but then I was like, what's next? What's more? What can I achieve? And he just brought me, and he was like, if you are here and you don't have me, you will suffer. You will suffer. So I just said, you know what? It's a choice. It's up to each and every guy, each and every person to realize that it's a choice. You lose nothing, but you are going to face the consequences at the end. But at the same time, you lose nothing. If I choose this and I am wrong, it's okay. But the reason why I know I'm not wrong is because number one, I've had an encounter. Number two, I know that this God that we are talking about is indeed a living God, not just based on scripture, not just based on scripture, but based on an actual encounter, that He is a true living God. So that's why I know that my choices, should I say 99% correct, 90% at least. So you can gamble with it. I don't mind. You can gamble with your choice and see where it leads you. And the thing about making this choice so young is that the earlier the choice, the more easier it is to revert. Does that make sense? So if I don't like this Christian journey, as I said, what's stopping me from choosing another one? But I am so convinced about it. I'm so in love with Jesus that I believe that this is the right choice. And it's not my obligation to try and convince other people to take it, but it is my obligation to present it on the table. if that makes sense. And I'm happy with the choice I've made, and I believe that going forward, as I've established a genuine relationship with this God that I'm talking about, that you know he's got my back. So yeah, it might sound a bit sentimental, a bit emotional, but that's the reality of this Christian walk, is that we strive to establish a relationship with God, and we give him control, and we walk with him, and not just necessarily for him. It's a relationship thing with him. There's many parts in the Bible which makes reference to the fact that each and every person walked with God. So it's a relationship thing. So this idea, as you said, of Christianity becoming a religion thing is totally wrong. It's not just about confirmation. It's not just about baptism. It's not just about the social construct of your country. It's more about, are you walking with God? Are you in a relationship with Him? So that's it. So I know it's quite young, and you know I have no idea what I'm talking about, but at the same time, I'm genuinely convinced in my heart, and I have that conviction there that Jesus Christ is real, God is real, and yeah,
Okay, you mentioned two things that I'll need to touch on. First of all, you mentioned this is what Christianity is about, right? So
yeah.
I'm gonna go into that, and you can explain to me, what you feel Christianity is about. I guess the other thing then that I want to kind of lean on a little bit is the idea of, okay, you have made this choice. We know that no human being is perfect. What is the basis of your certainty? Are you are you afraid that you're giving up things? What are you giving up? Those would be my questions. Or you also mentioned something actually that you have nothing to lose, but in a sense you have nothing to lose, but you also have some things to lose. Like some of the things that some of the people your age might be engaged in and doing, you don't get to do it, and sometimes you might feel left out. Some company that some people your age might keep hanging out doing different things, you don't get to do that, or you choose not to do that because of your beliefs. So what is that like on a practical everyday basis? Do you have an example, or how does it feel to you?
It's like it feels like you want me to say that I'm happy and I'm dissatisfied, but that's not the case. Yeah, I do get a bit sad sometimes, but I when you carry Christ in you, I believe that He strengthens you, empowers you on a daily basis, so that you are comforted by the things that you do not have, and He makes you think of the things more, like you lean more on the things that you do have. So yes, you don't really go out with friends much, you don't enjoy the pleasures of this world much, but then you get to speak with Him more. So it's like you sacrifice those things for your relationship with Him, knowing that this relationship is much better. And that's Christianity, because it's like it's relationship. When you get involved in a relationship with someone, you can't you can't cheat. You can't cheat. It's immoral to cheat. It's not right to cheat. And even if we go through the Bible, God just, anytime we see a people sin, the best way God tries to, if we read the Bible and we go through it and we see this idea of sin and pleasure and everything else, the best way God tries to correct or correct the understanding of what's going on is that He compares them, or gives this idea of the people cheating on Him with those things. Even sometimes He goes forward to say that they leave Him for a prostitute, because he sees those things as idolatry, as something which is unholy. So God tries to make us understand that this is actually a relationship, and if you're in it, you have to be committed. And the questions you're asking me is like asking a married man this question, that how do you feel that now you're married, you don't get it sounds funny, but that's the truth. But I already have this conviction that I'm married to Christ. I am in a relationship with Him. So I first of all try not to engage in those things, or engage in places which might trigger this idea to fall in love with another person, or fall in love with another thing, because I'm married. It's a relationship with Christ. So And the best way, you just have to look for things that strengthen the relationship. Of course, if a husband and a wife don't spend time together, if they don't talk, if they don't communicate, eventually the relationship is going to fall. So that's just it with me. I don't I do miss out a lot on those things, but I focus more on the relationship, so it doesn't really affect because I know that this is a relationship. I keep going back to that word relationship because that's what actually Christianity is about. And if I can make reference to again, in the Bible, there's a story of a famous story of the prodigal son, and people think that
This is
there's a story.
the story of the two sons, and one left,
Exactly.
asked for all his inheritance, asked his father to give it to him, and he left. And yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the question you're asking me now is that why didn't I become like the prodigal son? Why didn't I go and enjoy my inheritance? And the thing is that I am the older brother, but I'm better than the older brother because what the older brother was doing was that he was a slave. He made himself a slave in that in his father's house, he was carrying out his responsibility, but he did not know at the same time that he was a son. So, what I'm trying to say is that in this walk with Christ or in this Christian walk, you have to know your position. That yes, you might think you are the eldest son, you might think you're self-righteous, you might think that okay, yes, I'm doing the good things, but it's all about relationship. The thing about the older brother is that he didn't have the relationship with his father, and when you don't have that relationship, then you're not doing this thing called Christianity. You're doing something else. You're doing religion. You're doing slavery. You call it whatever you are. But once relationship is not involved, when you're not communicating with your father on a daily basis, that's when he now starts thinking that I didn't do those things. So where is my reward? But if he really understood that he had a relationship with his father, then he wouldn't have asked that question because he would have known what his reward was. But because he based his reward based on how he had to act and how he had to abstain from those things. I don't know if I'm making
Based on
sense.
the work he had to do.
Exactly, but it's not about that. And I know we'll talk about this more and we'll talk about, of rules and laws in Christianity, but it's not really about that. Being a Christian is not really about laws, it's about relationship. And I have to say this over and over so that we can, at least let the audience grab this that, being a Christian, especially as a guy, you might not see it that way, but you're actually married, to Christ. So that's it. I don't know if I'm answering the question well, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you are. Well, you're telling us your experience anyway, so you can't answer it well or not well. Okay, you mentioned a couple of things there. You mentioned experience, and you mentioned sin. So that brings me to my kind of the logical next step. What is day-to-day Christianity like? Now, you don't have to go into extreme,
Okay.
detail, but just what does it look like? Who do you have to be?
You have to be yourself. You have to be yourself, but you have to understand what you carry. And as I said, that you are married, that you have a ring on your finger, because like every day is full of sin. Temptation is everywhere, but then and not just physical sin, but with trials and everything, we can just get on your neck because you struggle. You might be your family might be going through one thing or the other, and all these things try and weigh you down on a consistent basis, on a daily basis, that you feel like you're attacked, and sometimes we think these things are normal, but it's not. We get attacked by so many things, not just sin on its own part. Just so many things try to weigh us down. So many things try to get us away from that relationship that we have. But then that's the importance of having a strong or developing a strong relationship, so that we reach a point where we can come home and say, "Oh, my wife today was stressful, but you know I know I'm still with you, and I know you make me happy and all that stuff. But we have genuine peace through Christ. We have everything we need, strength, preservation, health, peace. Everything comes just by being in that relationship. So that when the other temptations may come, we know that we are married to the one who gives us these things. So yeah, like on a daily basis, there's so many challenges we go through. I go through temptation as well. Sin is everywhere. It's right, especially in this time, where so
Just,
many
just,
things are.
um, just to cut you off there, just go into what you mean by temptation because it seems like a blanket word. And just, can you be specific about that?
Well, temptation is basically just what triggers you to sin. So how you don't want to sin. Well, there's something that actually pulls you towards it. So sin is not just bam. It doesn't just happen that way. It's like a magnetic force. So imagine trying to resist that magnetic force on a daily basis, because this thing we are in. It's called the flesh, and what happens is that sin is like the South Pole, and our flesh is like the North Pole. And then of course there's a magnetic force to it. It always pulls us to it. This flesh always pulls us towards sin. We're more attracted to sin, but then we know that we carry something greater that can withstand that force. And sounds interesting and all that, but that's the truth. So yeah, and sometimes we do fall. That's the part we always skip. We do fall.
That's the Christian journey.
That's the Christian journey, is that we do fall. But that's why our relationship is so strong. It's not like it goes now beyond the husband and wife, because you try cheating on your wife and seeing if she'll accept you back again. It's not that easy. But we have a high priest. The Bible calls him a high priest, who intercedes in this relationship we have. Imagine having a lawyer that anytime you cheat, the lawyer just goes to your wife and says, what, forgive him, and then your wife just takes you back. That would be awesome. But that's not the reality of it, unfortunately. But that's what Christ represents. He's the ultimate priest, the one who always gives us an opportunity to come back to the relationship that we have. Because before, in the olden times, they didn't have that. They couldn't come. Anytime they had to come, they had to sacrifice a lamb or do all the stuff. But through Christ, through him, we have a perfect relationship with the Father. And that's the Christian journey, is that when we fall, there's what we call grace that is able to lift us back up, that is able to strengthen that relationship even further. And then
to reconcile us back to God.
Exactly.
Bring us back together.
Yeah, but we don't try and cheat every day, because grace, we don't want grace to abound.
Yeah. Well, this I guess if you're cheating every day, then it means you're not really
exactly
in relationship.
Perfect.
So actually, what you find is that typically a Christian would be who they are. They might slip, they might fall, but then they come back. And the instances and the number of times when they fall and they lie or they steal or they gossip behind someone's back, it starts to reduce to the point that even doing any of those things is again, it cannot agree with you. I remember I have an experience where something had happened and I was really worked up. And the person who I was worked up with was like, don't be angry. Why are you angry? And I'm like, no. I'm not angry. You don't know me. Anger is not a thing for me. And I don't think they quite understood what I was referring. But, I can be worked up and I can be really agitated about something, but not let it slip to anger. And what I was trying to pass across at that point in time was that as a Christian, anger is not something we don't, I don't slip to that level, right? I can be firm, but not angry. And that's the Christian journey, where you get to a point where certain tendencies, you start to just, it's like you're able to apply a blockade, like they can't really come into your life. So there was a time when the easiest thing for me was to not steal, to lie. So it's like when an uncomfortable situation came, I was like, look, just lie. Who know, right? And then it got to a point where it's like, no, I can't. And maybe I might do it in the end, but then it's like, so the next time I'm like, no, I can't. So it then got to a point where it's like, I actually started to see that it was easier to tell the truth. It was easier to tell the truth because, yeah, the person mightn't like what you did. Your boss mightn't like what you did. Your friend mightn't like what you did. But the most important friendship, the most important relationship is the relationship you have with God. And I need to be true to that, even if it causes a little bit of inconvenience with my friend or with my boss or with my coworker or whoever it is. And that's the Christian journey. You start off and you're not perfect. You have ups and downs. Some day you're anxious and your anxiety boils over. Some days you're worn down and you snap at somebody. Some days you feel something, and when you could have been kind to somebody, you weren't kind with them, right? But then gradually that starts to change. That nature, those tendencies start
Yeah.
to change. And they don't start to change because you looked in the mirror and you're like, no, they start to change because you are becoming more and more like him, like
Yes.
Jesus.
Yes.
And he's imprinting himself on us.
Yes.
Would you say
I
that's what
agree.
you're
I agree. I
yeah,
perfectly agree with you.
yeah. And you mentioned sin. How would you define sin? I know I'm asking you some kind of blanket questions like
Mm.
temptation, sin, but how would you describe sin?
Well, sin is, to me, anything that falls outside God's laws. Anything that falls outside God's plan, or even God's will for you, which He has He has given us through His commandments and all that. So when we fall short, that is sin. When we fall short of God's standard, I believe that is sin. That's just my, in lay terms. So we can, one time I got a definition that sometimes, sin is what we do without love. It might sound funny, but that's another definition of it. But yeah, in layman's terms, sin is when we fall short of God's law or standard, which He has set aside for us.
I actually like that definition you said. Sin is something we do without when we do things without love. But actually, when we do things without love for God,
Okay.
right? Because when there's no love for God, and given that it's the love of God that guides every other action that we have, and then certainly you will probably do something wrong. Okay, the next question is probably a little bit more personal. I know you're a young man. I know you probably haven't been out in the world as much and whatever, but do you have any kind of change that you can point to? So this is who you used to be. These are kind of things you used to do, and this is who you are now. Do you have any kind of heavy past experience with sin, or were you just kind of just a normal kind of guy doing normal kind of guy things, and obviously look answer what you can, and
Yeah, of
what you
course.
can to you can
I
that,
think
that
the most,
you can leave that between you and God.
of course, but I think the most famous type of sin which we all commit is the one for lying, especially with men. I don't know what it is with the tongue of men, but yeah, lying was a heavy one. We always try to escape situations as best as we can. So before I was a liar, always try to escape out of a situation through the tongue, and that was I wouldn't say heavy sin, but that was there as well. And who I was, basically, I was that good guy, but I just felt like the- like some parts was just not right, you know, in certain points of my life. I just felt like it was not right, and I had to actually walk in total obedience. So yeah, I believe that lying was one of them. Like stealing, not really. Unfortunately, this idea of sexual immorality was not really heavy with me, but I'm aware that many people do struggle with it, especially at my age. So that's pretty much it. So
Yeah, that's I think, to be honest, some people, and it's just the way life is. Anybody can be a
yeah,
Christian, right?
of course,
The worst person or the nicest person, so to speak.
yeah,
I used to have issues with pornography. I think I might have hinted at it in my own interview. This idea of
yeah,
objectifying women,
yeah,
and I think it's something that a lot of people who are now Christian, who now are trying to be like Jesus and to follow that
mm,
path, that's something that they struggle with, especially young men. I'm not sure about women, but
mm,
especially young men. Anyways, everyone has their own story, so until they tell, then you know. But that was something that I struggled with for a while. And what changed my mind and what changed who I am was I reached a stage where I said, okay, I want to have a relationship with God. right? But even while I was in that relationship with God, I was still struggling with that.
Mm.
So it got to a stage, and this is, we talked about this a little earlier, this
Yeah.
idea that you fall, but then you get to the point where it's like, actually, I need to do better, right? You fall, but then it's like, okay, I need to do better and I can't make the same mistake. So what I found was that, yeah, I'd given my life to God, and I was still doing this thing that really didn't feel right to me to be doing. And I wasn't a Christian. Let's be straight. You can't be a Christian and be, sinning at the same time. But I was in the process, I was in the journey of becoming more like who he wants me to be, right? So then another time would come and I would be faced with the choice and I'd be like, no. But then I might struggle and fall again. But then what really kind of broke the kind of cycle for me was one time, just I think I was in church, and there was something being talked about by the pastor at the time. And he was like, what you value the most tells you who you love the most, or what you value the most tells you what you love the most. And I was at a point in my life where I wanted to love God, right? And that hit me. And I was like, okay, actually, if I want to love God, then I can't love this thing. I can't keep doing this thing. Like, that thing was a desire that I had to do that to satisfy myself, you know, but also an overriding desire. The overriding desire of my life was to have meaning, to have relationship with God, to feel that God shaped, God sized hole, right? And I knew that I had to give that up. And that's actually how I approach a lot of things in my life, where if it's anger or if it's anxiety or if it's not loving people, I think to myself, who do I love most? Do I love God most? Or do I love being like this? Do I love not liking people? Or do I love being angry more? Who am I going to choose here? And what helps me in my journey is I choose God. And when I choose God, it takes me down a path where everything else starts to make sense. Everything else starts to make sense. And that's my story a little bit when it comes to Christianity. The last thing that I will kind of touch on is Christianity, or being a Christian, is defined by relationship to Jesus, right? Relationship to God. And not just as in, oh, he created me, not just that I had a baptism or a confirmation or communion, more so that this is who Jesus is and this is who I have to be like him.
Mm. Mm.
So, what are some examples of the, so to speak, rules or relationship qualities that signify that a person is Christian?
That's a good question. And, if we talk about rules and regulations and laws or whatever you may put it, the first one we think about is, the Ten Commandments. And we always think, okay, if we obey the Ten Commandments, that's it, we're Christian. But I think it goes further. It goes further. Um, I believe it's in Matthew, in the Bible in Matthew. I think Jesus talks about this rules, and he classifies them as two. He categorizes them under two rules. The first one is that thou shalt love your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And the second one is that thou shalt love your neighbor as you love yourself. So, as you profess yourself to be a Christian, you have to love God. And that's I love how he puts it when he says love God. As you say, if you love God, you value him. So whatever else that you value, you leave aside, or you thought you valued, you leave aside. So it means that that is applicable to the Ten Commandments. If you love God, you do not fornicate, you do not lie, you do not steal. He puts it very, very concisely by saying that love God with all your heart, because he knows that when you love God, you forsake, or I'm just going back to, I know I'm not really answering the question, but I'm just going back to what you were saying about value and what you value. And, sometimes you might not know it, but you still value those things. You might still have, this desire to go back to those things, but you recognize the fact that you love God more. You want more of Him. So that's why you deny yourself of the things which you believe that you like more. I don't know if that makes sense. So you love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, and your mind. It means you forsake everything else. And number two, that you love your neighbor. So that's another part which we tend to overlook. That Christianity also involves how we interact with people. Are we forgiving? Are we loving? Are we kind to each other? That's what being a Christian is. It's that number one, that we love God, and number two, we become transformed to the point that we love, we show kindness, we are we are good to each other. That's part of our Christian experience. And how we strengthen it is by, of course, spending time with Him more. What you give your time to is what you actually become. If you spend time maybe playing soccer, you find that eventually you get good at it. So if you spend time, if you're committed to the relationship which you have with God, is that maybe you dedicate time to studying His Word, to listening to Him, to worshiping Him and reverencing Him, then He begins to transform you to becoming more like Him. So being a Christian, of course, as I said before, is a lifestyle which is central to it's more personal for you, and it is reflective in the way you interact with other people as well. So I know some people say I'm a Christian, but then you're more like a Pharisee. A Pharisee doesn't have. Yes, he's aware of the word. He can quote scriptures. He has proven he has the title, but he does not have the relationship. So
Yeah, just to clarify, a Pharisee is somebody
yeah,
from the time of Jesus who was part of a religious sect or a religious belief. And they had the religion, but they had no love. They didn't have love for God or for people. Now, not every Pharisee was like that. There were some good ones that are in the Bible, but by and large, some people can be Christians. I think that's the point you're making, where they are Christian just by religion, but
yes,
actually not by action.
Yes, and that's what I think also the podcast can be able to make us unlearn these things, not just learn, but also unlearn the things which we have heard about being a Christian, and which we know about Christianity as a community or as a society. Is that it's not really religion as per se. It is a more in-depth love for God, love for the things He loves, and also becoming like Him, and also expressing love for others. When we begin to express this, the Bible puts them as fruits. That adds to our Christian experience, that we don't only see it, but people can see it within us. So yes, the first thing is that it becomes personal for you. You make that choice, but as a second aspect to your Christian walk is that people can begin to see that yes, this person is indeed like Christ, or is indeed a follower of Christ, which by your definition is a Christian. So
I think you make a good point. Although one thing I will say is sometimes some people just won't see,
yeah,
like, because they have no reference,
of
right?
course.
What does a Christian look like? So even if you're the nicest person in the world, they'll see someone else who's nice according to their understanding of what nice is like, and like, oh, they're nice, but you yourself, they'll probably never describe you as nice. So anyways, it is what it is. I'm just thinking to myself that oftentimes people will refer to themselves as Christian, but in order to do that, you have to abide by the expectations.
Yes.
You just have to. And as you said it yourself, the first one is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. The second one, love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And that's just it. And when we talk about loving your neighbor as you love yourself, you can't love your neighbor as you love yourself without loving God.
Loving yourself, or loving God. Yes.
So I think that's just such a. I think there's a lot of people who are just nowadays they're like, okay, I'm a nice person. I treat
Mm.
people nicely. I give to charity. I feed the homeless, and I do this and I do that, and I thank God for them. And there's a lot of wonderful people who do a lot of really nice philanthropic things, just helping people out. And it is a tough message, but without the love for God and the love of God, you're not a Christian. Because God's example of love, when we try and love like He does, God's example of love is the best type of love.
Yes.
That's actually something a Christian has to just accept, that there is no one who can love like God can love anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I love like He does, as He gives me the ability to do, then I'm a Christian. When I try and love on my own with my own understanding, yes, I'm putting clothes on someone's back and I'm, giving them food to eat and all that. But in terms of their eternal safety, in terms of when they die, or in terms of after all this is over and I'm gone, what happens to them? And I think that's so key. God treats us equally in terms of His expectations. He wants me to tell the truth. He also wants you to tell the truth. He wants me to love. He also wants you to love. There's no difference. So oftentimes I think historically in Christianity, you have some people who have identified as Christian who have done things that go against what's in the Bible.
Yeah.
More about I'm a Christian. And maybe these people were in positions of power, who knows? But the expectation on me as someone who's been a Christian for years, and the expectation on you as someone who's been a Christian for a couple of years, is the exact same as the expectations on somebody who maybe decides at the end of this podcast, I want to try Christianity. We have to live a true life to God and to others. We have to love genuinely.
I agree. I agree. As I said before, and I think in the last podcast, is that Christ told us that anyone who must follow me means anyone who wants to become a Christian. If you want to be associated with this term, is that you have to carry your cross. You have to carry your cross daily. That's the expectation, that He expects you to carry your cross. It doesn't say carry that cross or carry this cross. It says carry your cross. So I believe that should resonate with the message that you have just shared about how the expectation of God for each and every one of us who profess Christianity is always the same. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ebube, for your time. I appreciate it. I've gotten to know you now for I think about 2 years or so. And I'm just really astounded by you and by your faith, making the choice that you have and being consistent with the choice that you have made. I've seen it firsthand in the time that I've known you. Oftentimes, you know people, but you don't know of their faiths. You just kind of know of them, you see them. But I actually know of your faith. I've heard you speak about it, and I've seen it as well. I'm thankful to God for you, and I'm pleased to know you, and I'm glad to be doing this with you, and be on this journey with you. And look, I'm excited for what the future holds for you. There's nothing that's impossible really for you. So nice having you, and I know that we will be together in future episodes.
So thanks so much for having me, and God bless you, and God bless this podcast you have here.
Sure. Thank you so much.
You have been listening to the That Christian Next Door podcast. For more information on the podcast, our activities, and who we are, you can search for us online at www.thatchristiannextdoor.com. Alternatively, you can find us on Instagram at thatchristiannextdoor. If you enjoyed the episode, please share us on your social channels and follow us on the podcast streaming sites. Thank you for listening. Be blessed.